What's up guys, and welcome to my 4.3 updated Phainon guide. In this video I'm taking over everything you do need to know in order to understand and build them, including a kit overview, best Lightcones, best Relic sets and Planar ornaments, the main sets you want to run, substat priority, and finally some general team building ideas. Stuck grinding in Honkai Star Rail? Need stellar jades fast? We've got you covered. Head over to U7 Buy, your ultimate gaming hub for save fast and cheap in-game top-ups. Whether it's Star Rail or your other favorite games, U7 delivers instantly and players love it. Check out their Trustpilot reviews, they're actually top ranked. On the Honkai Star Rail direct top-up page, you can recharge your account in seconds. For example, 8080 Honorific shards cost $99.99 in the official store. However, on U7 Buy, you can see the price is cheaper. When you head over to U7 Buy, you might notice that the storefront display prices currently match the in-game store, but don't worry, the magic happens at checkout. Once you click the Buy Now button, your total instantly drops to our actual discounted price only. Just pick your server, enter UID, pay securely, and boom, your account is instantly loaded. Want extra savings? Use code PRETSR at checkout for 5% off, perfect for last minute pulls, battle passes, or surprising a friend. And here's a bonus. If you spend $80 a month on U7 Buy, you can grab the Honkai Star Rail Express Pass for only 1 cent, which is nearly free. Click on the link in my description, recharge fast, save more, and keep blazing those trails. Phainon's basic attack does physical damage based off his attack to a designated enemy. His skill gains 2 core flame and then does physical damage equal to 300% of Phainon's attack to a designated enemy and physical damage equal to 120% of his attack to adjacent targets. His talent lets Phainon activate ultimate when reaching 12 core flame. Once you reach the limit, you can accumulate up to 3 overflowing core flames, and once the transformation ends, you will gain core flaming based on the number of overflowed points. Phainon being the target of an ally's ability from any other target, including enemies, will allow him to gain a core flame point, and if the ability is cast by one of Phainon's teammates, it will increase Phainon's crit damage by 30% for 3 turns. His ultimate makes Phainon transform into Kozlana and make him deploy the territory Ruinous Iron to. In the territory, Phainon will depart his team and they can no longer take action, and all enemies will have physical weakness. Kozlana doesn't enter his own turn, but will rather have 8 extra turns. The speed will be set at 60% of Kozlana's base speed. Once you fully deplete Kozlana's extra turns, it will launch a final hit that does physical ultimate damage equal to 960% of Kozlana's attack that is distributed evenly among all enemies. So in the transformation, Kozlana will have an enhanced basic attack, an enhanced skill that's a counter, and also his enhanced attack mainly that is also skill being the meteor. The enhanced basic attack will gain 2 points of Scourge, then do physical damage based off Kozlana's attack to a designated enemy and adjacent targets. The counter will allow him to gain Scourge by an amount equal to the number of enemies, and also 1 stack of Soul Scourge, and will also make all enemies immediately take action. In the Soul Scourge state, Kozlana will take 75% reduced damage, and an enemy target taking a turn or attacking will make Kozlana gain another stack of Soul Scorch. After all enemies have finished their actions, Kozlana will launch a counter attack doing physical damage equal to 40% of Kozlana's attack to all enemies, and additionally dealing 4 instances of damage each doing physical damage based off 30% of Kozlana's attack to 1 random enemy, and afterwards Soul Scorch will be dispelled. Each stack of Soul Scorch gained in that instance will increase the multiplier of said counter by 20% of the original multiplier value, and this damage is considered skill damage. If Soul Scorch is still active at the start of Kozlana's extra turn, he will immediately launch the counter. The meteor attack will dispel all debuffs on this unit, then do physical damage equal to 1170% of Kozlana's attack. Every 1 point of Scourge consumed will do 4 instances of damage, with each instance doing physical damage equal to 45% of Kozlana's attack to a random enemy, and then when you consume 4 points of Scourge, additionally deals physical damage equal to 450% of Kozlana's attack, which is evenly distributed among all enemies. Kozlana's talent will give him 4 Scourge points when upon transforming. If it happens during an ally target's turn, then the duration of all buffs on that target is extended by 1 turn and the current turn ends. Kozlana is immune to crowd control debuffs, has an enhanced basic attack and 2 enhanced skills, but cannot use ultimate as we did go over. During the transformation, increases attack by 80% and max HP by 270%. Each attack will restore HP equal to 20% of max HP. If Kozlana were to take a killing blow, he won't get knocked down, but will rather restore HP equal to 25% of max HP and immediately launch the final hit. For every remaining Kozlana extra turn, the final hit's damage multiplier decreases by 12.5% of the original multiplier value, and when the transformation ends, all ally speed will be increased by 15% for 1 turn. His technique, Phainon being on the team, will increase the max technique points by 3. Using this technique will always consume 2 technique points to attack all enemies within a range. Entering combat with this technique will regenerate 25 energy for all allies, and will gain 2 Scourge and 1 skill point. Will also do physical damage equal to 200% of Phainon's attack to all enemies at the start of each wave. Attacking normal enemies will immediately defeat them without entering combat, and if you hit no one, no technique points will be consumed. For his bonus traces, his A2 will allow Phainon to gain a point of core flame when the battle starts, and when transformation ends, he will gain 3 additional core flame. A4 makes it to where Phainon will be able to do 45% increased damage for 4 turns when receiving healing or shield that cannot repeatedly be triggered within 1 turn, and if Phainon were to gain an energy regen rate effect from a teammate's ability, he will gain 1 point of core flame. And his A6, when entering combat or ending transformation, his attack will be increased by 50%, stacking up to 2 times. Finally, for his Eidolons, his E1 will make the base speed inheritance ratio for Khazana's extra turns increase to 66%. That will be increased by 1.5% for every enemy defeated in that one battle, up to a maximum of 84%. Using ultimate will also increase crit damage by 50% for 3 turns. His E2 increases Khazana's physical res pen by 20%, and when using his meteor attack, if you were to consume 4 Scourge points, he will gain 1 extra turn. His E4 makes it to where when you use his counter, he additionally will gain 4 stacks of Skull Scorch, and his E6 makes the core flame limit no longer have an upper limit, and the battle starting will immediately give Phainon 6 stacks of core flame. Using his meteor attack will additionally do true damage equal to 36% of the total damage dealt in this attack to the enemy with the highest HP. For Phainon's best Lightcones, to this day his Phainon best in slot is his signature, providing 12 base speed for the wear. Damage dealt will also ignore 18% of target's defense. The wear using ultimate will grant Blazing Sun, which will be removed at the start of the turn. Blazing Sun increases the wear's damage dealt by 60%. The base speed increase is super important, as the only ways to actually increase the speed of Phainon's extra turns in his ultimate is base speed, as that's all what they scale off of. The stuff you get from like speed percentage buffs in battle, the stuff you can do from like speed boots and speed rolls, they don't actually impact that. Base speed is the only thing, so the only way you can actually get them to act quicker is his light cone and his E1. That's why the base speed alone is super important. Plus, defense ignore is also one of the few ways to get a massive increase on Phainon's damage, as he is quite saturated on stuff like crit and attack percent. At the same time, his ultimate will have a 60% damage dealt increase throughout the entirety, since this effect is very much possible on him. It sounds really weird because it feels like the moment you go into all, it would just be removed, but you have to remember Phainon's turns in ultimate are considered extra turns, not actual turns, which are fundamentally different. So throughout the entirety of the ultimate, you will have this 60% increase because you're not actually going into Phainon's next turn. It would be removed when you exit ultimate, and then Phainon's turn would act. In the ultimate, it's all extra turns, so in ultimate, 12 base speed, which is very good for speeding up the ultimate turns, 18% defense ignore, which gets stronger and stronger exponentially the more you do have of ignore / shred, and finally 60% damage dealt in ultimate. This is far and none his best in slot. If not his signature, you can use Ihal Dawning signature with 18% crit rate. Using basic attack gives the wearer a stack of Dragon's Call for 2 turns, with each stack increasing the wearer's attack by 18%. Energy regen rate is useless, so you ignore that part. So it's 18% crit rate and up to a 36% increase to attack. Simple yet effective. He is an attack scaler, so that's good, and then the crit rate is going to be beneficial to building him, since you do want to reach 100% in a battle. Free to play Lightcone from her to shop is also very much usable, providing they wear 8% attack every time they attack in battle. Stacking up to 4 times and breaking an enemy target's weakness will increase it damage up by 12% for 2 turns. At S5, each attack stack is 16%, and also the weakness break damage dealt increase is 24%. So you can get up to a 64% increase to attack, which is really high, and he does implant the physical weakness, so you can always actually break in his ultimate to get this effect. It's a little worse when you don't have it up, obviously, but getting this actual effect up and running is easy, since all you have to do is just break anyone's weakness for 2 turns, and you would be good to go. Artoria's signature is also usable with 36% crit damage, and using ultimate will increase the wearer's attack by 40%. Last part is useless, as he doesn't use traditional energy, so the 300 requirement is not gettable. So it is just 36% crit damage and 40% attack. Sweet, but effective. Anytime you do crit, as long as you have a good crit ratio, you're just going to be able to do more damage, and then attack throughout your ultimate is going to be more damage overall. The battle pass, Lightcone, A Trail of Bygone Blood, is also usable with 12% crit rate and 24% increase to skill and ultimate damage. At S5, 20% crit rate, 40% for skill and ultimate damage. Again, crit rate, very good for building him, and in his ultimate, he is doing skill and ultimate damage. Most of it is skill damage, however, the final hit is ultimate damage, so both of them are actually getting impacted. The only thing that wouldn't be is the enhanced basic attack, unfortunately, but you primarily are focusing on the counter and also especially the meteor. Them getting an increase here is the good part. Finally, if you have none of those, you could use Under the Blue Sky for 16% attack and 12% crit rate, defeating an enemy for 3 turns. At S5, 32% attack and 24% crit rate. So it's simple yet effective. With 32% attack, that's just going to increase all the sources of damage, and you could also build this in mind as long as you do defeat an enemy before going into ultimate, and then you would have it. It's good for also just building him, since 24% crit rate, especially from a 4-star Lightcone, is a lot. It's still worse than all the other options, but it is still very much usable if you are short on options. For Phainon's best relic sets, I want to talk about this new set first. This is actually his best in slot if you do have E2 or higher Phainon specifically. And I cannot stress that enough. At E2, that's when this actually becomes his best in slot. 2-piece provides 12% attack, 4-piece when the wearer enters combat or uses skill, their skill and ultimate damage dealt increases by 18%, that stacks up to 3 times, and a stack will be removed at the start of the wearer's turn or after using their ultimate. 2-piece just increases overall damage, and then the 4-piece can provide you up to a 56% increase to damage dealt for skill and ultimate, even if you don't have full stacks going into ultimate, and it might be a bit fluctuating when you are outside of it, since you might take a turn or two and then using your ultimate. But once you're in it, anytime you do use something considered a skill, you'll stack it and then it won't be removed because you're not using ultimate again, and you're not starting a turn, you're starting an extra turn. So this is actually his best in slot, roughly around 5% more than Wave Strider if you have E2, and it gets even more better the longer the fight goes. So if you are someone with an E2 Phainon, or you're planning to get E2 Phainon on the upcoming rerun, this would be the new set you want to farm. For any other case, or if you just happen to have the set still laying around, you can very much still just use Wave Strider. 2-piece providing 16% crit damage, 4-piece when the wearer becomes a target of another ally's ability, gains a stack of help that stacks with the 2 times, having 2 stacks, and using ultimate will consume the help stacks to increase the wearer's attack by 48%. 2-piece, anytime you crit, it's more damage since you're just getting more crit damage, and the 4-piece provides 48% attack. And it's complementary to the playstyle of getting Phainon into ultimate. You're literally just targeting him over and over again, so you'll actually have this stacked up very, very quickly, and then once you go into ultimate, you would have a 48% attack increase throughout the entirety of the ultimate. This is still slightly better than the other set I just talked about at non-E2 Phainon. Again, the other set is better at E2 or higher, but Wave Strider does slightly, roughly around 2% outperform when not E2 Phainon. You can still very much use the other set at E2 or less, so let's say if you just have E1 even, but this set still would be good. And even if you're at E2, if you just happen to have a set prepared, or you have an existing Phainon going into actually looking to see if you can update the build, if you just want to stick to Wave Strider, that is fine, it still performs good. But I do want to definitely mention that the other set is better for E2 or higher Phainons. The only other thing you can really want to use on Phainon is Scholar. 2-piece providing 8% crit rate, 4-piece increases damage dealt by skill and ultimate by 20%, and an additional 25% for the next skill after using ultimate. So it makes them easier to build. You just get a easy 20% increase in damage dealt for skill and ultimate. And finally, once you go into ultimate, the first meter you do is going to have that extra damage increase. Unfortunately, for the rest of the ultimate, it's not going to get this effect. It's just going to be the 20%. This is worse than both Wave Strider and the other option I did mention with the upcoming set in 4.3. But if you have a really good Scholar set laying around, you definitely can use this. From Planar Ornaments, his best in slot still overall does go to the Arcadia set, which is able to increase the damage dealt by the wearer and their memo sprite by 9%/12% for every additional/missing ally, stacking up to 4/3 times. So in Phainon's case here, he's departing everyone, so everyone's going to be missing. You get the full stack of up to 36% damage. This is the Planar Ornament that has the best results. However, his second best in slot is Rudolin Arena, which is actually not much worse still. So if you happen to have really good Rudolin Arena pieces, you can still very much use this with 8% crit rate and also a 20% increase to basic attack and skill when reaching 70% or higher crit rate, which is not a problem. So 1, it gives you the crit rate, and then 2, for the enhanced basic attack and the enhanced skills, they get the damage increase. Unfortunately, it doesn't impact the actual final hit anytime that goes off, but for the main sources, it is getting impacted. Arcadia's set is better, but the difference is only roughly around 2 to 3%. So a really good Rudolin Arena can actually easily outperform a pretty good Arcadia. So just use whatever better pieces you do have of the 2 sets. But if you want the best results, then of course you would be going for Arcadia. With the main sets on the relics, for the body, you're practically always going to use crit rate, as you do want to get to 100% crit rate in battle. However, if you happen to have a crit rate Lightcone and maybe really good crit rate rolls, instead you can run crit damage. For the feet, I'm gonna be honest, nowadays you really should just run attack percent. Speed setups, they're not really anything anymore. The only time you'd ever want to run speed boots for that breakpoint is if you're someone that's going outside and inside of ultimate and you have a -1 setup existing or something, and you're gonna need that setup to quickly get you back into ultimate. That is the only specific case I would recommend speed getting you to breakpoint. However, attack percent is just usually always better because speed especially doesn't impact his extra turns, so attack percent is usually just best for the best damage. For the orb, physical damage is best. However, if you have a really good attack percent orb, feel free to use that, but try to get a physical damage orb instead. And for link rope, run attack percent. For the subsets, if you are running speed boots, you want to make sure he is 1 speed above the -1 character you are running. So if your Sunday is around 137 speed, you would need your Phainon at 138. Sunday could also be Bronya, so if your Bronya is also at the same speed, you just need to get Phainon speed above, but speed is only if you are going for that setup. For most people, I just recommend ignoring speed entirely, as it's not going to impact anything, and you are most likely running attack percent boots. Past that, your focus is just crit rate, crit damage, attack percent. Crit rate, be sure it's 100% in battle, as you don't really want to be missing any crit instances, as it's going to be a big damage drop off. Crit damage, also just get it to as high as you possibly can. A good amount to have around is 170%. Having around 170% is going to be fine. If you can get it higher than that, that's going to be even better. Attack, if you're running attack boots, you are looking at 3000 or higher. If you're not running attack boots and you're doing a speed setup, then getting your attack around 24 to 2500 is still going to be fine. But for attack boot setups, 3000 or higher is going to be the best. For Phainon team building, he does have quite a few iterations of teams, but a common teammate with Phainon to start off right away is Ceridra, especially because of the double meter value. Third slot can often go to an action advanced character, especially after her Nova Flare. Sparkle is overall better than Sunday. However, just use whichever one is available to you. In this case, I'll just use Sparkle. And Phainon is a really good sustainless character, because if you are able to finish within the first ultimate, which is the primarily goal with Phainon, unless you're doing specific stuff, it makes sustain the setups just a lot better as opposed to other characters. But if you have to run a sustain, the primary one is going to be Donhang. And then for sustain this, you can imagine who you'd put in. Your goal would be characters that can target. So in the sustain the slot, you can actually do Sunday Sparkle. This is very popular. If you are doing a Sparkle plus the -1 setup, be sure Sparkle is at least 1 speed faster than the one with 100%. Otherwise, the tuning is going to mess up, because the way it goes is Sparkle goes, gives Phainon a turn, you skill with Phainon, then it's Sunday's turn, then he action advances Phainon, and then Phainon skills again. So I mean, also does go in the action advance slot too. This is a lot better if you have E2, just because a lot of the last slot teammates, especially for sustain this, are non-Crisis heirs, and even with Crisis heirs, sometimes it can be slow to charge. However, if you do run a Cyrene team with RMC on the team, you can actually run it to where when you start, the first mem buff goes to Cyrene, so you can skill with Cyrene, do whatever, the mem buff goes active, you give it to Cyrene, you get to skill again, and then you can activate her ultimate, reset up everything, and then make sure the mem buff is on Phainon before going into ultimate. If you don't have Ceridra, you can also sub out her for one of the ones I was talking about. So in this case, you could use an action advance her like Sparkle, you can use Sunday, you can use Bronya. So in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and put Sunday here for an example. I'm also going to take off Cyrene here for a different example for a more standard team. I'll just put Tribby, since Tribby is also pretty good with Phainon, especially with her more rare buffs that do benefit Phainon, especially if you do have her E1 for true damage. Last slot here, in this case, you can use Donang for a very standard setup if you are going for a sustain run. This also works as well. And then if you're missing teammates of this, or you're running sustain this, you would sub out accordingly with the characters I was talking about. One thing to mention is the upcoming character Mortanix Blade is actually a good sustainless option for Phainon. So if you were to run a team such as Phainon with Ceridra and then other slot being whoever, so I'm just going to put Ceridra here. If you have E2, you can put Cyrene. If not, RMC, Sparkle, Sunday, so on and so forth. And then last slot would go to Mortanix Blade. And that is the full 4.3 updated Phainon guide. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, drop a like, it would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of style content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.